Hello, my name is Anya, and today I will be talking about oppression in the Batays. So most of you know what the Batays are, but I'm just going to explain. They're little towns in the middle of sugarcane fields where Haitian immigrants work and live. So in 2013, there was a court ruling that said that anyone born to undocumented parents is not a citizen. And this really hurt the Haitian community because citizenship is extremely important, as some others talked about, in getting protected under the law, etc. So in identity class this semester, we read a book called Pedagogy of the Oppressed, which talks about how the oppressed must lead the movement to end oppression. They must critically examine their situation and take action to change their conditions. So this is Carlos, the man in the picture. He has lived in the Batays his entire life, and when he was 12 years old, his father, who worked in the sugarcane fields, got in an accident cutting cane and became blind. So Carlos, at 12 years old, had to take over for his family to support his family, which was his mom, his dad, and two brothers. So he stopped going to school at the time, and Escala, which was an NGO that works for human rights and immigration, was extremely involved in the Batays and became close with him and his family. And they ended up actually introducing him to Rustic Pathways, and at 17, he started working for Rustic Pathways. Rustic and Escala both helped him to gain his citizenship, and it took him about 4 years of him going to court, filling out paperwork. Rustic helped him pay for that also because it's pretty expensive, and he was lucky enough to gain his citizenship. And most Haitians actually don't gain their citizenship even before the court ruling was passed, because of lack of knowledge on how to gain citizenship. Also, people don't know their rights, and a lot of times they don't have the money. Also, this was before La Sentencia, the court ruling, so it was a lot easier for him to do it. So he was able to rise out of poverty and oppression, and now he goes back into the Batays and helps the oppressed people in the Batays, just like in Pedagogy of the Oppressed, what we've read about, which was super inspiring to me, reading the book and then seeing this story of how it's portrayed in real life. Just a picture. So I want to talk about injustice towards women in the Batays. So most of you might remember these 3 little triplets that came to our health clinic in the Batays. This little guy's drinking some, I think it's anti-parasite medicine. We gave them anti-parasite and multivitamins. So one of the things that I noticed in these health clinics was how many young mothers they were, ages 13, 14, 15, with 2 kids or more. And I was wondering why there were so many young mothers here, or in the DR, and not so many where I live in California. So after doing some research, I came to the conclusion that that was because of a lack of education, lack of access to birth control, and a lack of choice to have kids because of the machismo culture. So the machismo culture is extremely prevalent in the DR and in Costa Rica, and it is when men are more dominant and aggressive, and this can lead to danger and femicide for women. So femicide, I think as Claire and some people talked about, is the act of a man killing a woman just for the fact that she is a woman, and it's very common, too common in the DR. So Haitian women are especially in danger of femicide because they don't have citizenship, so they're not protected under the law. Without papers, they're unable to file a police report, and even Dominican women with papers, if they want to file a restraining order, for example, they must go to the man themselves and give the restraining order to him to sign, putting themselves in a lot of danger. The police are also not very helpful with this. Police also can commit femicide and be harmful to women, and if a woman tells a policeman about something that happened and the man does go to jail, in the Dominican Republic, people can only go to jail for 30 years. So when they get out, they might just go and kill the woman again. Or not again, but they might just go and kill the woman after they get out of jail. So one of the leading causes of death for women in the DR is maternal mortality. This is usually because of them trying to give themselves abortions. Abortions are illegal in the DR, and this causes a lot of problems because many women need abortions for health or safety reasons. Women are penalized 5 to 10 years in jail if they get an abortion, and the doctor who gives the abortion is also penalized 5 to 10 years. And many women are actually put in jail for having miscarriages as well, because they are thought to be induced miscarriages as a way of aborting. So in development class, we watched a short video called Why Did Mrs. X Die? And this was about the road to death, which are situations and things in a woman's life that inherently lead her to death. Some of these things are poor socioeconomic development, excessive fertility, high-risk pregnancy, and life-threatening complications. So after learning about that, I was thinking about the road to life and what could be some things to help women in developing countries be able to live longer, have better health. Some of those things are raising the status of women, family planning services, community-based maternity services, and accessible medical centers. Many women do not have access to medical centers. When they're having a baby or if they need to go to the hospital, it can take hours and hours for them to get there. And a lot of time they don't have money for transportation. So that's a big issue. Even in the US, maternal mortality is 3 times higher for Black women. And I thought that was super interesting and terrible because it might be easier for people to these happen in developing countries, but not so much when you take it back to the US or a very developed country like that. It's quite terrible, actually. After talking to Jackie about this, we came to the conclusion that this is probably because of economic situations and lack of access to prenatal care for Black women. So seeing these injustices has inspired me to be more grateful for what I have as a woman where I live. And I have always actually been really interested in women's issues, and I've done a lot of research, and I've worked for women's issues before, but this helped me to understand more about women's issues in developing countries and look at the similarities and differences between developing and developed countries. And now when I get home, I would like to work for better equality and health for women all over the world. Thank you. Any questions? Yes.
So you talked about machismo, and then you also talked about like making more protection for women, like legal protections, economic independence, those kinds of things. How do you go about like changing culture?
Actually, we talked about this in Costa Rica a little bit. Pamela gave us a talk about machismo culture in Costa Rica. And she was saying that one of the things that happened recently is that now men who commit street harassment are liable to go to jail for that. And that doesn't happen all over the world, definitely. And that's kind of a new thing that I think Costa Rica is working towards, having less of the machismo culture and creating laws that will help protect women. So that would definitely be a way, like just laws like that in general.
As a follow-up to that, how do you think we should balance like wanting to preserve and maintain certain cultures and their differences from us, from the West, and actually recognizing where some practices are harmful? Like, how do you go about how should one go about drawing the line? Like, okay, this is a cultural practice that's acceptable and we should work to preserve it, and this is a cultural practice that I see as unacceptable, and you should see it as unacceptable too.
Yeah, we actually talked about that in development class, I think in the middle of the semester, about cultural relativism. And one of the examples that we talked about was, I think in India, there's something called wife burning or something like that, where women are burned if their family doesn't have enough money to pay the man's family when they get married. And we were talking about that, and that's like a very cultural thing, but it's also a very terrible thing. So we were trying to talk about how to balance that, as you were saying. And honestly, that's really hard. I think one of the things would be talking to the people, like not just the leaders, as we've learned, but talking to the people about what they need and what they would like, and maybe educating them on how other parts of the world do things and why certain things are bad, but maybe not like forcing. I mean, I don't think it's impossible to force, but yeah. Yes.
I learned a lot from that. I appreciate that.
I'm glad.
I'm curious to hear about how your opinions may have shifted when it comes to reproductive rights, such a worldwide controversial, difficult issue.
Yeah.
Have your views shifted or changed over the course of the program?
Not really, actually. I've done a lot of research on this back at home, and I've always been for abortion and the right to choose because I think it's really important. And yeah, and I just kind of honestly like it made my views stronger being here after seeing these women and people who didn't have the right to choose, or and so many women like die and because they can't get abortions. And I think it's crazy that laws can stop people from doing things that are so like there should be their choice, like their body, and like it can literally kill them. And they will go to such lengths to give themselves abortions, which shows how important it is. And I don't know, it just definitely like strengthened my views being here.
Yeah, well, I think we're gonna. So we have a couple people that just want to call in really quickly.
Oh, yes.
Oh my God, can you help me to call?
Karen?
Yeah.
Karen?
Karen.